Before today's episode of the Brand Archive, an urgent news bulletin. An unfortunate series of events led to a small fire at the Good Kids Studios. A paperboy errantly discarded a lit cigarette into the wastebasket next to this episode's footage, causing the reels to go up in flames. No footage made it out of the tragedy. Our condolences to those who enjoy the video podcast. I'm happy to report the boy escaped with only minor facial scarring. Now, back to our regularly scheduled programming.
Hi, welcome to the Brand Archive, a podcast by the Good Kids where we dive into nostalgic brands, find out what went well, what didn't go so well, and what we can learn from it along the way. I'm Ben.
And I'm Ashton.
Now, today's file is still developing. Hold on a second. Oh! Today we're talking Polaroid.
So what's your memories with Polaroid? Do you have any as a kid or family members or...
I don't have a lot of memories of Polaroid, which is really sad.
Yeah.
I think, we always had them around, but it was almost old news by the time I was toddling around. Right?
Sure.
For some reason, it was kind of like not interesting to me.
That's too sad.
Isn't it sad?
Yeah, for me, like, growing up, I think my mom's a fine artist, and so our
Yeah.
entire basement is the art room.
Yeah.
And as a little kid, I kind of grew up down there, right? And one of the days I was digging through a tub because she kind of holds on to everything, and I found a Polaroid picture. And so I was like, Mom, like, how, where's this? And of course she had her camera. It didn't work, so that was a bummer. But that was my first introduction to Polaroid, was learning that you can take these instant pictures.
Okay, so you saw the photograph.
Yes.
And then she had a camera, but it didn't work.
It didn't work anymore, no, because she was like, oh, let me go see if I can find that. And then sure enough, we did, but it didn't work anymore.
Okay.
But that was kind of my first introduction to it. And I mean, all through school, I was interested in photography. And then now, today, I have an instant photo camera because when I was doing wedding photography, that's something that couples would just love, right?
Right.
You have to wait weeks, even days, for a sneak peek for your wedding photos, but the couples would love getting just like one or two instant photos. And it's so easy to do, right? You just snap the picture. So that's kind of whether it's Polaroid or Fujifilm or whatever, the instant picture trend has been something that's always been intriguing to me.
Yeah, the fact that you can instantly give something to somebody, I think that's still relevant. And of course, it's not as big as it was, but it's still something very cool that you're right, that is interesting for weddings or events or even just hanging out with your friends. And now that we're kind of talking about it a little bit, I do remember in high school, there was a smaller version of this thing, of the Polaroid camera, that I remember we would take pretty embarrassing photos of each other and like stick them up all over the place, in school and stuff. So,
yeah.
I don't know if that was like an exciting thing, but it was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it still has a lot of relevance. I mean, and that was early 2000s. We were still playing around with this idea. So, so I do think that the idea is still fun.
Yeah, I still think it's very relevant. So it's fun to kind of go back into the history files because they did have quite a dramatic up and down story. And so it was a fun one to learn about.
Yeah, and it's such a unique technology and a unique use case for the technology that even while I was doing the research on this one, I wasn't sure how they could have foreseen a pivot and really leaned into a pivot effectively. It would have been a huge risk in the early 2000s to get rid of their bread and butter.
Yeah.
So it would have been a very like razor thin timing thing that they would have had to make a huge shift of the whole ship of their company to be successful. And so it makes perfect sense to me why they are where they're at now.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, and now it is a legacy, fun, nostalgic thing to partake in.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why people love it. So, all right. Well, should we get into the history?
Let's do it.
So, in 1937 is roughly around when they got their start. It was founded by Edwin Land, and he was in Massachusetts. He was a scientist. He was a Harvard student, so he must have been quite intellectual. But he completed his freshman year of college and started really studying the market of polarized sunglasses. That must have just really intrigued him, and naturally that led to kind of where Polaroid went from there. But
right, and just for people who don't know, polarized lenses. Basically, what it's doing is it's cutting out bouncing light. So there's like certain vibrations that light sends to your eyes. And when you're looking at something without polarization, you're seeing a lot of extra light bouncing off of things. And when you would utilize polarization, it would cut through all of that extra light and give you a clearer, more contrasting photo. So this technology is still being used with sunglasses, photography, and I don't even know the amount of things. Like, it's still being used everywhere. So
yeah.
Yeah.
And right away, I think he didn't have his mindset on photography. I think he had a passion for photography, and so when he himself was taking pictures with his family, I read that his daughter was like, "Why does it take so long to see this photo that you took, Dad?"
She was a time traveler.
Yeah.
She was from the future.
And so I think, that was 10 years later. I think that's when he had the aha moment that, like, this could be used for photography, this technology and this process that he's been studying scientifically.
Imagine. I mean, this was back before that. I'm trying to put my brain where he was in this moment.
Yeah.
Because my son asks me questions like that all the time. Why does this happen this way? There are things that my son has said that are probably exactly like this, that if I chased them down, I would have had brilliant ideas.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to put my brain in his brain at this moment. His daughter was asking him for an impossible thing. And he was just like, yeah, that's a good question. Why isn't this instantly a photograph? And you said it took him 10 years?
Well, yeah, because, he founded the company in 1937 as he's researching Polaroid and this idea of creating polarized products or things, right?
Yeah.
And then it wasn't until 1947 when the first Polaroid camera, came out.
Yeah.
And so there's a 10-year gap in that process.
I mean, it's just the innovation or the boldness of the person who takes an impossible idea and says, I think I can... Maybe I can't figure it out, but I'm going to try.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And when he revealed it for the first time, he had people in the industry videoing him, taking pictures of him, producing this first Polaroid.
Really?
Yeah. So he had like a press release.
Okay.
I mean, it wasn't the first one, but
Sure.
like when he announced it, and I was watching a video, and I guess one of the people who was videoing or documenting this was kind of like not really paying attention, and it happened before he even understood what happened, and it was so revolutionary that the guy was just like, can you do that again? Like, I didn't understand. So he made him do it again. But all the people in the room were just dumbfounded because they've been in the industry their whole life.
Yeah.
And this had never been even a thought in their head.
Yeah, and then here comes the scientist.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so the first ever camera was the Polaroid Land camera, and it was really the genesis of instant photography. The photo took 60 seconds, from taking it to being able to see it on the film. And it wasn't quite like you see today where it just spits out a picture. There was a manual release of the film, and then you had to pull a tab to release the negative from the print. So it wasn't quite as easy and slick, but still, massively better than whatever was before that. And I think that's kind of how he got this kind of reputation of being like the Apple of its time, because it was just like, that was almost as revolutionary as the iPhone for the first time, right? So it's just a very cool moment in time.
Yeah, and you think about who is the customer for this thing, and it's definitely early adopters. It's the type of people who are waiting in line for the next iPhone every time it comes out. And throughout Polaroid's early days and into, while they were a premium item, basically, I looked it up. It was like around the idea of what we think of, like $1,000 to $1,200 for one of these items, and not to mention the refills. So this was an expensive and wonderful thing, and so it wasn't for not everybody had them back in the day. Not until they started to get more cheap and more accessible.
Yeah, I think it was a step towards the accessibility of photography, but it just definitely wasn't like everyone had it, for sure. In the 50s to 70s, that's when they first gained their international recognition. And I am familiar with Fujifilm, and I know that they are in Japan, so I was kind of curious how the global dynamics were at play here. And it seems like in Japan, Fujifilm and Canon were more so the household names. I mean, they were familiar with Polaroid, but it wasn't like cool.
Yeah.
Whereas in Europe, it definitely had a lot more traction, especially in the UK, Germany, and the Netherlands, where we'll later learn has this like strong following of Polaroid fans. But it definitely was dominant in the US market. So they were like well known on a global scale, but they weren't like dominating.
And I think as far as branding goes, I understood it kind of, we go over this a little bit in our Nintendo episode, but I kind of saw it as like a Nintendo idea, where it's more about this is unique, this is interesting, whereas Canon or Nikon or Fujifilm were probably more about the technology. This was coming in at a more approachable and more like less technologically in your face idea. It was more about the uniqueness of it.
Yeah. In 1972, they came out with their next new camera, which was the SX70. And that was the first one to eject the print automatically, like what we're familiar with today.
Yeah.
So it took, I don't know, 20, 30 years, 25 years, I think, to get that process to be as smooth as it is today. But they're definitely well known for that camera in the 70s.
Yeah, and I looked this one up, and this is a beautiful camera. Like, you could see this on a hip, you could see this on anybody today. It was just a really good looking camera. The interesting thing that I understood about it is there's no battery in it. And I think that's part of why it's called an automatic camera. Each film pack that you put into it had a battery that was initiated when you injected the film pack into the camera. The battery was used to produce the film and everything.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was super, like, it's so out of the box from what I understand of cameras. Of course, this idea is not eco-friendly, but it was the 70s, so they didn't really care about that.
That wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
4 years later, in 1976, this is where it starts to get a little dramatic with Kodak. Which today we have a Kodak camera over by Ben here.
Yep. A brownie.
Yep. But they were kind of their main competitors at the time. But it got dramatic because Polaroid had the trademark for the Polaroid paper sheets that, obviously they use in their cameras. And Kodak decided to use that technology for their own cameras. Yeah. And needless to say, Polaroid didn't like that very much.
Yeah, the cameras were cheaper. And so they maintained this like crank idea, whereas the Polaroid cameras spit it out. They like kind of had a manual crank to get them out. So the main camera was cheaper, but the film was more expensive. And they justified that because the photo was bigger and had better colors. That's what they said.
That's what they said, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, so this actually was an opportunity for Polaroid to utilize those patents and maintain dominance in their area of expertise, their niche.
Yep. Yeah, so the other thing is that this wasn't like a quick trial or court case or anything. I've read that it took like 10 to 14 years.
I read 10,
yeah. For it to go from beginning to end. So that's just wild, and that's like a lifetime for a business, you know what I mean? So I'm sure it was quite frustrating, but eventually the court ruled in favor of Polaroid, and so Kodak had to cease production, pay Polaroid $909.5 million, and they had to like offer refunds to their customers. And so maybe we need to research Kodak in season 2.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know how they survived that, because that seems like quite the mess, but
yeah, I can't imagine how they pulled themselves out of that. That's a huge like mistake on their end, or even if it wasn't necessarily a mistake, I didn't really look into the legal battle, but it's a huge hit.
For sure.
Absolutely.
In 77, I did not know this, but they introduced the Polaroid Instant Home Movie Camera because, you know, they're trying to keep up with the trends.
Well,
it was called Polavision.
Yeah, Polavision.
Even just saying it just is like, ooh, I don't know.
Well, and it's so funny. They just had this chunk of money because they were killing it. Sure. And I think this was a moment where it's like, what other industry can we disrupt? So they thought video would be the perfect way to go. This idea was really kind of cool, but it was almost like it was kind of the wrong direction. The right idea, but the wrong direction. And it was actually discontinued only 2 years later. So they dumped a ton of money into this idea, developing hardware and just marketing it, only to find out that they didn't really reproduce the convenience of the Polaroid camera. Sure. They wanted you to be able to film and then watch what you filmed instantly. But the biggest problem is you needed a viewer. You needed, video is much different than imagery because you need an RGB viewer or something to plug this into so that you can see it. And that limited their portability so badly. There was actually an advertisement that I watched where they were marketing it on like people skiing on the water.
Okay.
And so he films it, and then I think he like plugs this tape into the viewer. But I'm like, how did he get the viewer out there? Because he obviously needed to plug it in somewhere. It's around water. This just doesn't seem like the idea of this Polaroid camera that you can almost fit in your pocket.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Not as much instant gratification there, but
no.
So that was kind of almost like the beginning of the end, or at least the beginning of the dip, I would say, for Polaroid. Yeah. Because a couple years later, Land, who is the founder, he exits the company, and I read that he was kind of coerced into resigning, so that's kind of sad. And I'm not sure why. Maybe he was just, getting old and approaching retirement, or maybe there was a disagreement as far as technology and how to use it. Who knows?
Well, and a side note here, this is really interesting that you say that, because not only was the company related to Apple, he was related to Steve Jobs.
Like, actually, like, family related?
No, I'm sorry. No, like, people would kind of
they would draw connections.
Compare them as very similar types of people.
I see.
And they both got kind of kicked out of their company. And the big difference is that Steve Jobs came back to Apple.
Sure.
And things turned around when he came back.
He never comes back.
Man never comes back.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where they went wrong.
Maybe.
Probably
what he thinks.
Yeah.
Like in the 80s, technology, of course, continued to shift, and so you continue to see more and more of a decline, because that's when we have like single-use cameras, right? Like the ones you can see at weddings nowadays, they're set on the tables. Videotape camcorders, and then of course digital cameras come on the scene, 10, 15 years later, but it just becomes less and less of a technology, essentially, that people want to use.
Mm-hmm.
I read that in the 90s, they were a key sponsor of NASCAR, which I have not been a NASCAR fan, but I was surprised at that because I just don't see the connection.
Yeah.
But I guess that was a big thing, and I'm sure it kept them super relevant, even though they were having those kind of cultural issues right now with all these technologies coming on the scene. So kudos to them for getting out there and
it's good. I think when I think of NASCAR fans, I don't necessarily think of them as the same people who grab onto their Polaroid camera to like take some pictures.
Yeah.
But I could be wrong there, but it just seems like maybe the wrong audience.
Yeah.
For the company.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't see the connection either, so. And then sadly it just keeps going downhill because in 99 they try selling scanners, right? I feel like they're just trying to grab at all of these products that aren't working, from the video cameras to scanners, because in 2001 they have to declare bankruptcy, and so that's kind of not the final end, but the end of the Polaroid Corporation at the time.
Yeah, and I think it's sad because it continues to get worse. The idea that slapping the Polaroid logo onto things will add to the quality of the item. I think they ended up selling the items that they started to sell got cheaper and cheaper, even to the fact that they started selling plastic Polaroid cameras a little bit later too. In to the idea that this is basically a trend in the 90s, that we're gonna feed this trend for like 6 months, but the brand took a huge hit. Yeah. Instead of the brand helping sales here, we ended up just killing the brand over time.
Sure. And I kind of think, I'm like, wasn't there a partnership or a collaboration or something that they could have maybe, I don't know, joined efforts with?
They should have joined. They should. Yeah. They should have joined Instagram, I think.
Yeah. Was Instagram around then?
No, not yet.
Let's see. So, I mean, between that and then like in 2008, instant film production honestly just stopped. And so here you have these like loyal fans that have just watched Polaroid go to the ground, but they love instant photography, right? And so now this is like another hit, right? Because now they can't actually create and make art like the way that they want to. And so this group in the Netherlands, a really just loyal instant photography fan group, created the Impossible Project, where they saved the last Polaroid factory so that they can continue to have the instant film that they needed.
Thank goodness.
That's just, I was around in 2008, obviously. But like, I kind of would have loved to like read the news articles at that time, because to me that just seems like you have to have such a loyal following for a group like that to be so committed to saving all of the assets to do that. So I just was very impressed by that.
Yeah.
And then we have a surprise guest in the Polaroid story. When I read this, I was like, what? Lady Gaga herself was appointed the creative director of Polaroid in 2010.
Yeah.
Which I can see that happening. That makes sense to me.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. And so while she was there, they released a instant mobile printer in 2011. And honestly, I think that's brilliant. That's kind of similar to what I have today, because what I have is a printer that I can connect to my phone. So any pictures I take on my phone, I can still print out kind of in a Polaroid fashion.
Yeah.
And so I think that was brilliant because it let people do just that. But she, at least as of 2014, she is no longer a part of the Polaroid family.
Yeah.
So it was just like a quick little blip in the timeline.
Well, and I read that there wasn't a lot that happened while she was kind of running the creative direction.
Well, she's busy.
Well, yeah. Yeah. I doubt she put in her 40 hours a week,
Oh, man. I mean, honestly, between the bankruptcy and 2017, the amount of different owners of Polaroid was just all over the place. I mean, it was constantly like sell by, sell by, sell by, and they would change their name every single time. And so it was just this crazy couple decades for them. But eventually it was acquired by a guy, and his name is very wild. But he was the largest shareholder of the Impossible Project.
Okay.
And his son Oscar is the one who persuaded him to invest in it. And so eventually he purchased and acquired it entirely in 2017. And that's when they rebranded to Polaroid Originals.
Okay.
Because at the time the Polaroid name wasn't being used at all. It was all of these other like weird names.
Yeah.
And so I think he was trying to draw it back to the original company. And then sure enough, 3 years later, they finally rebrand to Polaroid once more. And so that's why today we still have Polaroid products out there on the internet.
Yeah. There's something interesting about the opportunity that Polaroid has in 2025 with AI creating imagery that you don't know if it's real or not. You can create a photo, you can print it out. I think that there's a really interesting, I don't know what the opportunity is, but the word originals just kind of gave me the idea that this might be a way to authenticate something, but it's real. And it's way harder to reproduce a Polaroid than a photograph.
Well, even, I'm still slightly a part of the wedding photography scene.
Yeah.
And so I keep up with that stuff. And nowadays, wedding photographers are having these add-ons to wedding packages that are film.
Really?
Yes, they're like, we'll have film capture along with the regular capture, and that is a high-end premium offering that people are learning how to do, and they're offering it, and people are buying it. And so I think there is this trend right now to want that nostalgic handmade feel. And so yes, I agree with you. I think Polaroid should capitalize on this trend, and obviously film is kind of even a different technology than Polaroid cameras, but all the same, I mean, even like fancy weddings, they have Polaroid cameras at each of the tables for people to quickly take pictures, so everything's going back to, we want it handmade, we want it touched by a human, because AI is coming on the scene. We don't want a perfect bot created painting or picture. Like, the whole reason we like art is because it has a story and it's been touched by a human. And so I think like it's the prime cultural wave right now for Polaroid to continue to thrive. So I'm very excited to see where they go.
There are opportunities out there.
Yes. Oh,
we're going to find them with you, Polaroid.
Yeah. All right. So from a brand perspective, I really just want to quickly touch on the name because I was kind of curious how he came up with that. And to no surprise, the polarizer or polarization is the technology that he essentially created. And so he wanted to obviously have that piece in there. But oid means like or form of in like the science and tech world. And so he kind of, combined it to have Polaroid.
Okay.
So honestly, like from a naming perspective, I think it's nice because we've seen a lot of groups just use their last name, which is fine. It has recognition and credibility. But I think it's cool that he was able to, kind of like the iPhone, right? He kind of named the technology and it didn't have to be tied to his personal brand, essentially, because now it's thriving and growing and still something we talk about today.
Well, even, and we talked about it a little bit, but there was a camera called the Land. I think that was like the first camera.
Sure.
Was the Polaroid Land camera. And it's like, the fact that his last name is Land usually would be a great thing in branding, but Land camera kind of sounds uninspiring.
Yeah, or like you can only use it on land or something.
Right. Yeah.
Kind of a weird connotation there, but
so
maybe he should have done Edwin, his first name.
Yeah.
The Edwin camera.
Ooh.
Or camera E.
I like that.
Anyway. Too late. We also want to talk about the logo because there's a few different iterations over the years. And we did a lot of digging, but we couldn't pinpoint who did the first few logos. Our best guess is that it was the internal team at the time. And honestly, looking at the first two logos, you can just tell there's not much brand personality. It's just a typed out word for the most part. And so it kind of made me laugh because I'm like, oh yeah, he was a scientist. Like,
right.
No offense to scientists, but usually they're all about function, right? Does it work? And it did. Mm-hmm. But there's really no personality or character to also leverage on that.
Yeah. And, you know, I think there are things with the first logo that they had. The icon is explaining polarization with the two circles intersecting. There are ideas happening there that could work. But yeah, even the idea that you are kind of explaining the science in the logo is a scientist idea, right?
Yep,
so that's really funny.
But of course we have the rainbow, right?
Yeah.
I think Polaroid is super well known for the rainbow.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that came around in the 70s when they released that secondary camera we talked about, that it was like an instant shootout of the Polaroid picture. Mm-hmm. And so the rainbow stripe essentially reflected the full color instant film innovation that they had. And I think we learned that they did it on their packaging first.
So yeah, the rainbow in the logo actually came after the package design breakthrough of 1958. The rainbow was on the packaging, and they thought, well, that's how people know Polaroid, so that they brought it into the logo later. Mm-hmm. But in 1958, a freelancer named Paul Gimbarba
your guess is as good as mine, Ben.
was brought on to really just kind of wrangle the brand together. The first thing he did was formalize a logo and make sure that it was consistent across all platforms. And his biggest opportunity here was looking at the landscape of packaging. At this time, Kodak was dominating because they were so consistent with their yellow boxes.
Sure.
The yellow boxes were almost all yellow and black, so they were really recognizable, and they would just like block up a whole section, and you knew where to go. The problem that Paul, I'm just going to call him Paul. The problem that he saw and the opportunity that he took was that there was so much information on this package, and so many was crammed into the package design, and just the fact that the whole thing was covered with color. He's like, this is an opportunity to give everybody one place to rest their eye, because the whole packaging landscape, they threw a lot of text and photos and color on all the boxes. So he took the opportunity to use most of the landscape as white and black and very stark, clean design. And then he developed this very colorful spot with a rainbow design that he would direct the eye. So he would have a small part of detail on the box to help call attention to the box, because we're not boring, but we're going to let your eyes rest. That's the whole idea. So another big opportunity was the boxes of Kodak were very flimsy. So he took the opportunity to thicken up the paper and make very hard. And you see this with Apple. When you open a new iPhone, the package is just dialed in, and it feels good to open it. Like, everything fits really nice together. Everything is like perfectly designed to where it all fits really nicely in there. So he spent a lot of time making the experience of opening a new camera or a new package of film really satisfying to just open it up. And then, along with the simplicity, he utilized the color of the package design to make the product scannable. So yes, you'd find your block, and people do this all the time today. But in this industry, in this time, this was revolutionary. He would use color to help people find what they're looking for. So yes, you found all the white and black Polaroid, beautiful, simple design. Now you're just looking for blue or or you're just looking for a giant number, because he would utilize big font contrast is what I call it, but he would have very important information really big so that you could see it from across the room.
Yeah.
So this was really helpful and in early adopting.
Gotcha. And then I should back up. So in 1977, they do incorporate the logo, or the rainbow, into the logo. And it's funny because they have it in there for almost 20 years, but then there's like this 5-year gap where they remove it. And it looks so different. Has a little sun starburst icon.
Yeah.
But then, of course, in 1996, they go right back to it, because they probably realized you can't detach from the rainbow because it worked so well in the packaging. It became a part of the core identity of Polaroid, you know?
Yeah, I saw that too. And I don't know if they got that from the idea that the photo is shooting out of the camera. That's kind of what it reminded me of. I have no idea what the sun represents. But yeah, I would love to understand the strategy behind why they changed it. Because it was kind of an unfortunate change.
Mm-hmm. And then in 2017, when they were acquired by that guy that we mentioned to Polaroid Original, a London-based agency called Design Studio revamped the identity, which their name is Design Studio.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I like that, actually.
Yeah,
That's
just
fun.
super straightforward. And, they did, like, the brand that you see, or the logo you see on the website today is new and modernized and curvy, and I think it happened in 2022, but I couldn't find who did it, so I'm kind of assuming that Design Studio did. But I will say, I think it works.
Yeah.
They continue to lean into the heritage and the nostalgia, even though the logo is kind of updated and modernized.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually when I first saw it, I didn't love the trendy P there.
Sure.
But when I saw the D on the end there, I don't remember what those logos are called, where you can like spin them around and they're the same. Mm-hmm. This isn't that, but it kind of was like, there's like a mirror effect there that I actually really like.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Yeah, it's very nice and balanced for sure.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like a time to kick it to our sponsor.
This is an emergency bulletin from the Center for Marketing Director Disease Control and Prevention. A baffling and deeply contagious condition is sweeping across America's agencies, co-working spaces, and boardrooms with kombucha on tap. It's called Marketing Director Measles. First detected after a 36-year-old LinkedIn user attempted to rebrand her cousin's baby shower, the affliction is spreading fast. Symptoms include unwanted retagging of other people's Instagram posts, a persistent itch to say, let's workshop that, and in advanced cases, attempting to A/B test your own personality. There is no known cure, but you can help stop the spread. If you or someone you love begins using conversion funnel as a flirting tactic, please seek help. This has been a message by the Center for Marketing Director Disease Control and Prevention.
It sounds unlikely.
I gotta stay clear of that one.
Yeah. Yeah, you do.
The last thing I want to touch on with Polaroid is just the competition and like how they continued to stay different. Because right away, they didn't really have any competition because they're the only one with this technology. So wonderful.
Yeah.
But then, you see Kodak and all these other brands coming on the scene. And like, as you described, like Apple, right? Like Polaroid was always the cool artsy friend kind of vibe.
Yeah.
And it really leans into like nostalgia, retro, like Gen Z vibes today, which is really cool. Whereas Kodak back in the 70s, they were kind of the mom and dad like camera brand. They really were like birthdays, graduations, reunions, like how do we bring families together, and just kind of the classic like family album type personality. And so I think that's a nice contrast, right? Like they both could coexist. They're both necessary, but they're telling different stories and they both have unique personalities. And then in the 90s, you see Sony, Canon, and Nikon come on the scene. And Canon is really known for being like technically excellent, almost like a little intimidating. But they're straightforward and they're bold because of that, but they have a lot of trust. Like even today with any of their cameras, people trust Canon. Sony has always been super innovative and like tech forward, so they're like the techies, I guess. I have a Sony camera. I wouldn't consider myself a tech nerd, but I do love the camera. It's just awesome, and it's because they're one of the first ones to have a mirrorless camera.
Yes.
So, plays into their story. And then Nikon has always been more of like classic outdoor adventurer, kind of leaning to that photojournalism side, maybe more intellectual. And so I think today all of those kind of connotations are still true for those brands. But it's fun to kind of see how they all had their own identity throughout the last few decades.
Yeah, it's always fun to look at, how are all these brands successful in their own lanes? What are their own lanes? And usually it comes down to what type of person are they selling to?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Because there's hobbyists, there's professionals, there's kids, there's parents who just want to capture moments. I mean, there's so many applications for cameras.
Yep.
And then their big competitor today is Fujifilm, which we talked about, and they've been around since almost the same time, the 30s in Japan, but they kind of have like the cool but understated energy. It's very intentional. They're in Japan, so of course they have that design philosophy to them. So it kind of feels like film photographer who likes digital but still likes the smell of being in the dark room kind of vibe. So I think, again, looking at Polaroid versus Fujifilm today, I think those personalities are still distinct enough where they can lean into that. And like I said, with AI, even just that cultural shift, I think being the cool artsy friend that Polaroid is will continue to be more and more valuable. Like, I think they're perfectly positioned for what's about to come.
Yeah.
So when we think about takeaways, what kind of comes to mind for you, Ben, in regards to Polaroid?
I think Polaroid was one of those brands that, of course, they did marketing, but they really did a great job at brand experience. The fact that they built a product where you could take the photo and share it with somebody, that's kind of the core of the whole brand and how it was so easily passed around. Instead of marketing and kind of shoving things down your throat, it was more about who was using that camera because you wanted it because somebody else had it. And as I was doing research, they had a lot of artist programs where they would actually give cameras, and a lot of times to influencer type people back before Instagram, like Ansel Adams was one of them, and Andy Warhol. So if you are watching these people create instant art, people famous in photography industry or famous in the fast art industry, right? You want that camera. And it's not because the company is telling you you want it. It's because somebody that you look up to is using it and producing beautiful things with it.
Yeah, that's really true.
Yeah.
The other thing that I can't ignore is just this fact that this like loyal following of people in the Netherlands bought the factory to keep the art form alive, essentially, because and I guess not all of that was attached to the Polaroid brand, but Polaroid was the godfather, if you will, of instant photography. So of course they have this just strong sense of loyalty. And so, whatever they did in those early days before all of the negative things started happening, I think that's something that we can maybe try to take some pointers from, because like what you just mentioned with the brand experiences, like it builds such a strong loyalty that literally had this uprising of people even though they were basically gone and dead.
Just wanting to save the company.
Yeah.
Wanting to save the idea of what it is. Save the nostalgia for it. Like I said, I think I hope for those people who did take a risk on rescuing Polaroid that they find something within the AI and within this new age that's coming in that really boosts Polaroid back into the limelight. I think I think that they're, like we said, I think there's opportunity, and I would really hope that they could find huge success.
A new resurrection.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, this might be my favorite audience question of the entire season, because I think people debate about this all the time.
Yeah.
And that's, should you shake a Polaroid picture? Do you have the answer?
Well, no. I just watch people do it all the time. And here's the funny thing. I always watch people pull it out. They shake it while talking about, I don't think I actually have to shake it.
I know.
Like, this is actually what happens. And I've seen it almost every time. Well, not. There are people who just shake it and they don't say anything.
Yeah.
But most of the time I see them saying, I actually don't know if I have to do this or not. Do I have to do this? You know? But you're already doing it. But no, how cool is it that when you shake something, that means a brand?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think it's partly because of the 50s, but more recently it's because of the song that came out in 2003. And it says, like, shake it like a Polaroid picture.
Yeah.
And it's the Hey Ya song. I can just hear it in my head. I'm not going to sing it for you. But that's, I think, where it kind of adds to that idea, that connotation that you should shake it, even though you actually should not shake the picture. You do not need to. Sometimes it can ruin it. But in the 50s, you did that to dry it off. Mm-hmm. You had to get the developer liquid off.
So a little bit about that is before, when he first developed it, it would come out dry, and it would have this instant photo come within a minute. The photo would come. What they were finding was that the image was starting to fade over time. And so that means it could have ruined the company. Sure. It could have completely ruined the company, because if the photo doesn't last,
I mean,
what's the point?
Yeah, that's what people are buying it for.
Yeah, so he had to develop a system where it actually came out wet, and people were shaking it to dry it off. But I don't think even back then, I don't think it helped the development. I think they were just trying to get it dried off.
I see. Sure.
And that just kind of kept going, it seems like.
Yeah.
It just became the new habit.
I know.
We've been doing it without asking.
The myth still hasn't been busted. But no, you do not need to do it.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's what we have on Polaroid. And really, that's the wrap of season 1. We hope that you enjoyed this season. We're excited to think on what we can do for season 2. And we would love your guys' input on what we should do for season 2.
Yeah, and what brand should we cover now that you kind of have the lay of the land? You know, are there some brands that are from your childhood that you want us to uncover and dig up? Because we'd love to do that. So make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen. Join our email newsletters so that when we send out promotions about season 2, you're going to be the first one to hear all the good stuff to come. So I think that's a wrap on season 1.
Bye.